Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Just like to call this meeting to order. To remind everyone at the outset, this is a 2-hour meeting, so hopefully we'll have some good discussion. But I'd like to entertain a motion for approval of the minutes of 11/15/22.
Motion to approve.
Who motioned?
Lori did.
Lori? And I need a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Kathy seconded. All those in favor of approval of the minutes for 11/15/22, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Before we get into the discussion of the critical areas, I'd like to have, she was not on the agenda, but I'd like to have Kim McNamara from the City Health Department give us an update on where you are with your study.
Okay. We are still on track to have the community health profile back to us in December, and that is the description of the overall community being done by CHI. We did lose a few days to illness, as everybody seems to be experiencing this fall, but we expect that it will be in before the end of December, and that's the first piece of the community health profile and the needs assessment. We are going to be focusing on one of the main stated goals for ARPA funds for the needs assessment portion, which is next, and we've begun planning and instituting that. And one of the 4 main purposes of ARPA is to address systemic public health and economic challenges that have contributed to the unequal impact of the pandemic on certain populations. That's what we're going to be focusing on with the needs assessment. We have learned an awful lot so far, even though we don't have hard data and a report to report back. We've spoken to a lot of families affected by COVID, people very disproportionately affected, families with young children, families with parents with dementia, families with persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities that not only lost their care for their folks, which is often 24/7 care and supervision, but it impedes their ability to work and to function, and they're just exhausted. And so for them, this is the 3rd year of COVID because those systems haven't recovered yet. So in the final reports, hopefully we'll be able to get some real clear reporting done on that. The next slide, please. And I just wanted to, here you go. Just wanted to remind everybody that the the definition of health includes physical, mental, and social well-being. A lot of the local community health profiles that have been done recently really focus on health care. We are really focusing on these other aspects and what can a municipality do to intervene with ARPA fundings and with many other sources of recommendations. So next slide, please. The community health needs assessment will be looking at these vulnerable populations, and we've already added one to this that I saw in your notes that we came up with as well. But these are populations we've already identified that live in Portsmouth, and we're hoping to learn more specifics about these populations in the community health profile. If other vulnerable populations are picked up through that plan or local discussions, we'll add them to the list, and we have added food insecure as another group. Next slide, please. So, I had updated this with a big bullet point. It's not on there, I'm sorry. But solutions come in many forms, not just money, although I would like to repeat my strong recommendation, and I hope you include this in your report to City Council, that we hold on spending of any of the remaining ARPA funds until the full evaluation of the public health needs of this community have been heard. Also, some interventions don't cost money at all or cost very little money, and there are various ways that we can intervene. We need more data and we need more understanding of the situation to know specifically how to apply these, but it's not just funding. We also have things like infrastructure. One of the things that I had discussed with the recreation director a while ago is that during some pretty severe heat waves, we had we opened the pool longer, but some kids couldn't get to the pool. Some kids didn't have any parents at home to take them. Transportation was a problem for others, a lot of the things that you already talk about. But infrastructure can be one of those things if we could put some neighborhood splash pads in, and I think we discussed that earlier. Legislation. There is no guarantee of services for persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It's not an entitlement, such as when you become a senior, you're entitled to certain insurance and Social Security if you've paid in all your life. But those entitlements don't exist in New Hampshire for some of our most vulnerable populations. And the City of Portsmouth does have a very active legislative subcommittee, and so maybe one of the recommendations as an outcome of this is that we try to get state law that says people are entitled to services if they fit into the category of individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. We also have heard stories of people 80 years old at our local homeless shelters, persons with dementia in Portsmouth Housing Authority. These are people that should be entitled to services, and those facilities are not necessarily built to support people like that. It's really kind of a unfair situation for all around. And so there's sometimes legislative solutions. Investment, of course, funding certain programs, funding certain things that we feel will be good. One of the things that we're also aware of is we do have minority populations in Portsmouth. There is, I don't know if it's true of Portsmouth, we're waiting for the data, but there is also knowledge that minorities have more issues with pool safety, and there's more drownings in some of those communities. Well, if the issue is swim lessons and access to swim lessons, maybe our city recreation department can do free swim lessons for certain populations. So those are the types of interventions that we also hope to see. And then, of course, the city does a master plan. It would be great that whatever we learn throughout this process and what this group is bringing to the table as well, if there are components that can make their way into the master plan, let's get that on the books and start building the city to be more supportive of these groups. The Public Health Improvement Plan, which I hope is an outcome of this process, most of those components probably will have some relationship to a master plan. Education is also a very important outcome of this, I hope. I hope that what we put together as a report and try to update over time will become the standard of how City Council learns about who their populations are that live in Portsmouth, and who they're responsible to, as well as city staff. We all have very different experiences because we all do very different jobs, and so some of us are aware of the diversity of Portsmouth, and some people don't know that. And then, of course, programs, training, and staffing. One of the things that comes to mind is that with the difficulties that a lot of families with persons who need 24-hour, 7-day-a-week care, they need a break. And so instead of just offering a yoga program for seniors to come, maybe we offer yoga programs with support staff so that families can get that 1-hour break to go to the doctor's appointment or to go. These are decisions that are not mine, but they're the types of recommendations that I do wonder if it won't be an outcome of this process. And next slide, please. So the focus groups will be based on vulnerable populations that we've identified. And our first focus group is going to be on seniors. It will be January 4th at 2 o'clock. It's a listening session for 90 minutes, and we have Maria Solari from GoodWorks, who will be the running this program. And of course, Tori Jennison is very active in this whole process with us. The timeline that we hope to complete all of these individual focus groups is in April sometime. And by the end of April, we hope to have a final written report about what we have learned through this process. And that is my update.
Wow. You need to change the 2023.
Oh, yes, I do. Thank you.
Wow.
Kim, how do you spell your last name?
MC, capital N-A-M-A-R-A.
A-R-A. Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one question about, you indicated you had a strong recommendation that you're hoping that we hear, and pass on to the council, and that is to wait until this study is completed before a decision about the entirety of the ARPA funds? Or just, if you could
yeah.
go into that a little bit.
So because, the process of looking at the community, really getting data-driven evidence and getting input from all the people that are affected takes a very long time, I had asked that $3 million be set aside so that when we're through that process, we can come up with a community health improvement plan, and we'll have still a quarter of the funding left, since at least a quarter of it was meant to correct these public health issues. It just seemed fair to me, and so that's how I set that up. However, outside of that $3 million, over the course of last year, we've become aware of requests of almost another $3 million from just local nonprofits, and that was just a sort of survey of a few, it doesn't include all the local nonprofits, of almost $3 million additional dollars that they needed to sort of do their COVID recovery. And so we're looking at $6 million of potential need in Portsmouth. Those needs should be reassessed because we're now several months out from those requests, and we don't know what the outcome of the community health improvement plan is going to be. It's very easy to spend $3 million in public health because we never get funding. So I'm just requesting, we've already spent half the money, let's not spend any more until we're through this process. I don't know how reasonable it is. But I'm, public health hat, let's go for public health. This is probably a rare opportunity. And the point I really want to make is that we saw what COVID did to these families and our vulnerable populations. We're going to have another disaster, and are we really planning to make this an easier process for those individuals, which makes us a more resilient community in the end? And that's really what the purpose of these funds are in entirety, is to make us a more resilient community and to help us to recover.
Point of clarification, so the $3 million that you have requested as a set-aside, that is a request of the funds that this committee is discussing, or is that a part of a prior ask of the other city funds that have been set aside?
No, that's not been approved. It's been something I've requested for probably a year now, but there's nothing approved yet. And so it would be one of the things that if you support it, I would hope the city council would, hear that recommendation. And, they seem pretty supportive of public health. So, but anything that's been spent has had nothing to do with public health, my health department, except for the $65,000 for this study.
But again, just to be clear, so it's your ask of us to set aside or make a recommendation for a set aside of the 5.4 million?
That would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, just because I'm pro-public health and we only have that much left. But the $3 million I'm asking for wouldn't even be used until we have a public health improvement
Right.
plan.
Abby?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
I'm
was just
sorry,
going to
Laura.
ask, what would you spend the money on if you had the $3 million? Because, we don't want to duplicate your efforts, but you don't know yet until you get your survey done. Is that right?
Right. So I don't know, because I'd be speaking from what I've learned so far and not what the public input is, and I think
Right.
that public input is real important. But we have what looks to me like some sort of a workforce crisis on our hands when it comes to anybody caring for children, for elderly, for persons with disabilities. And I see that responsibility falling onto some existing resources that really were not designed to take care of that. So one of the things would be how do we address that? We have persons with developmental disabilities that they're in a housing crisis, they're in a staffing crisis, they've lost 3 years of learning, which is going to probably take many more years to rebuild those skills. That group should be focused on because, in my opinion, they're the most vulnerable population we have because they're vulnerable for their entire lives. They're not children that grow up. They're not people that lived a life independently, and not all of those people. And then, went into nursing care. Their entire life has to be structured. So I have big ideas, but sometimes it's supporting a program, if I may use yours as an example. So one of the, you know, I'm a real champion of your program, Lori, because not only do you provide housing for people with developmental disabilities, you provide the support all in one. And that's what we need to solve that problem of, you know, just the constant crisis everybody's in. You did a tremendous amount of fundraising on your own. The last we spoke, and this was many months, huge gap filler. So thank you for letting me use that, and I would spend money on things like that.
Nancy?
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's a little late, but you're from, I have two questions. What overall community, community health needs? So is this overall Portsmouth Health?
Yes, this is the city of Portsmouth we're focusing on.
Okay, that's
However,
what I
when the reports come out, we can't always get data that granular, so we might be paired with Portsmouth Newington for some data, some statistics, you know, or if it's a Rockingham County is the least they break some things down by, we'll be getting Rockingham County data instead of just Portsmouth specific.
Okay. So the title of the organization you're with is?
City of Portsmouth Health Department.
Health Department, okay, that's what I thought. And the other question was, you're having a focus group January 4th. Are there any other focus groups listed for, in the next couple of months? Because many people I've spoken with that I've known for years said those are good things to do, is to bring people together to have different discussion groups on different topics of health and wellness.
Well, these are not scheduled yet, but the other groups that we have planning going on for are youth, LGBTQ, physical and intellectual developmental disabilities, minority, housing insecure, low income, seniors, we've got that one scheduled, persons who speak English as a second language, people with behavioral health needs such as substance use disorder, mental health, and refugees, immigrants, and persons who are food insecure. So those are what we're focusing on so far. And as we learn more about this process, we might add more groups. We might be combining some of these. It really depends on who we find to host these sessions and who the people are they serve. But we want to reach everybody. And so if there are persons experiencing homelessness that aren't connected to any programs and they're, living in Portsmouth, we'd like to find a way to reach out to them so they can come too and tell us what are the barriers for you getting, into systems that will be helpful for you and enjoying quality of life.
Thank you. Kathy, did you have a question?
So sort of, not really. I'm still getting a little confused by the process because there's that one chunk of money, which is the $5.whatever million, and we're not the only group that's
Right.
making recommendations and putting in requests. So my understanding is that there are decisions being made on a rolling basis. So, I think we could bring forth the fact that you are strongly recommending this, but I don't know how that's going to play out in terms of what we're trying to figure out we're recommending as.
Right. It is a confusing process. Some of these other groups that are asking for funds might be providing public health services or things that would help. An example is early on in this process when ARPA first became available, I had a conversation with Russ Grazier about, kids have lost 3 years of learning, and there are some kids that never really get the same opportunities to learn a musical instrument or take art class. And so he had developed a program of summer camp for kids where the kids didn't have to pay anything. They could come and they could learn various arts and music activities, but the funding for that, I believe, went through the school system for ESSER, so they're already taken care of. But there might be numerous groups that have great ideas like that that will serve the same purposes that we're trying to achieve. We just got to, it took quite a while to get approval for this public health profile to go through, and so by that time, it takes a certain amount of time, and so there's nothing I can do about how fast we can get it done. So that's why I'm saying, please have something left over so that we have something to work with. Because the intention of this is for public health improvement.
If I'm understanding this correctly, what you bring to the table is in many ways overlaps with discussions that we're having.
Absolutely.
So, we're talking about potentially supporting or funding some of the same organizations that deal with homelessness or mental health or children being left behind, et cetera, et cetera. So the one thing I do like about your recommendation is that, one, it's the Department of Public Health for the City of Portsmouth who is doing this study, looking at this longer term, and hopefully from a sustainability perspective, resiliency perspective, which is, to me, makes a lot of sense. So if we make a recommendation to the City Council about how these monies should be expended or allocated, then it almost makes sense to me. And it aligns very well that the Department of Health for the City of Portsmouth is thinking about this and acting in a way that hopefully supports what the recommendations that we'll be making. So at least from my perspective, it seems to make sense. And because these funds, I mean, if they're set aside, managed by the Department of Health, that's a plan. As far as, it's almost a package that we can make a recommendation to City Council.
In which case, we would ask for the $3 million to be set aside for the completion of the public health improvement plan. And Will, you had made the observation that so many things overlap, and it's true. We are seeing transportation overlap. We're seeing housing. We're seeing workforce and not being able to get wages where they need to be for people to live here. So much of what you're working on very much impacts what we're learning about as far as public health problems in Portsmouth. So even if not all the money's set aside, if we could beg for $3 million to be, held until the ending of that community health improvement plan, we would be delighted.
It almost seems like if we make some, do our presentation, these are our ideas as people in the community, and then we're going to have this big piece of data to support it. It's almost like you're providing the data that really supports it. I mean, obviously we have information from all the people we've met with, but this would be one more piece to say, because these are a lot of the things we're saying already, but you're now talking to people and having forums and saying, see, I told you so, and it kind of justifies the money even more, I think. Like the being spent towards public health needs.
Yeah, and I hope I don't come across as I told you so.
But I think it's data to support what we're trying to say.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're pleased with the public health support that we're getting, and we're pleased that so many people are understanding the impact of COVID on some of our most vulnerable populations, and that it's not getting better.
Right.
And so that's really my goal, because that's my position.
Any other questions for Kim?
One more question.
Go ahead, Laura.
And this is kind of a process question, because I fully support all the work that you're doing, and I think having that data in April will be really helpful to the city going forward, beyond when this money is no longer available and you're looking at other ways to support public health. There's a short list of nonprofit organizations that had submitted a request to you, some with numbers attached to it, some without. Where does that stand? What have they been left with as an understanding of?
So I gather that information to give to my administration so they're aware of the needs in the community. And then I turned that over to this group when this group started forming. So I have nothing, I never had any say in whether or not that money was spent, but I thought it was really important for the city administration to understand these are the types of needs that we are seeing in the community. And so there's nothing further that I'm doing with it. And a couple of those situations have changed. Mm-hmm. There was money requested there for continuation of a network of case managers. They never got funding, and so they had to sort of do other things. So that's too outdated to rely on, but I'm willing to bet the same situations still apply. You know, you have daycare centers that can't pay staff enough to fully open up, and then you have families that can't go to work because of that. And
Yeah.
in getting back on our feet from COVID, it was shocking to me to go through facilities that play a vital public health role for kids at risk or daycare centers, and their buildings are half or more empty because they can't get it to the certain census because they don't have the workforce. And so those are things that we, you know, some of those types of requests were included. I don't know that those have been effectively addressed, whether it's on a state level or a local level or.
Did you reach out to these organizations? I'm just curious how, because there's
reached-
so many more, obviously, than
There
are
are.
listed here.
I reached out to them because there are organizations that we work with pretty routinely, and I wanted to get a sense of what they were experiencing, and I wanted to get those types of requests before people who were decision makers so that they wouldn't be forgotten in the decision-making process, because there is so much competition, and it's a, you know, it's a huge task for the council to decide how to spend these funds. I just wanted to make sure that the people that we know that provide public health services weren't forgotten in that process. So that's how it all started. We didn't even have all of the rules and regulations related to ARPA in hand before we started gathering that information. Again, it was just an attempt to make sure that people who need to know that these organizations exist and they're hurting.
So, can I follow up? So I think that that's important to clarify, because to me, that's been a really confusing piece of this process, because I think on some level, it felt like people were actually applying for funds and waiting to hear if they were going to get some of those funds to do some of the stuff. So if I understood correctly what you just said, we're now at a point where those are just examples of some of the impact that we should be considering in our recommendations, but that those organizations know that there's not a continued process for those requests, right?
Well, I haven't been back in contact with those organizations. I gathered the information and I sent it to the city manager, and I don't know, you know, the inner workings of that department. I don't know what happened to them at that point in time. I'm not aware that that those funds have been granted, but I know that they were very much involved in setting up of this discussion, this task force and this group, is because we knew that need was out there. So I don't believe they've been acted on, but it's not in my hands any longer, and I'm sorry I don't have a clear answer.
I know as a person who applied that I haven't heard anything.
Okay.
So,
That's the same for us.
yeah.
Same here.
Okay.
But-
Well, and as a person who didn't know about
About it.
applying.
Yeah, yeah. But my understanding, Kim, on this, again, to Kathy's point about process, was that this really was your attempt at gathering information in a sense, because it was not an official application process. I mean, as you said, at that point, the ARPA policies and instructions were not even out yet, right, for this sort of thing?
That's
And
right.
so,
It's said on the top of it, the purpose of this is to inform the city manager and possibly others, which I assume meant city council. But, so I was gathering, I reached out to organizations that we know pretty well and rely on pretty heavily for public health services. And then it got to a point where it seemed like the whole process was going to be bigger, and so we stopped and waited for instruction.
And it might be that what comes out of here is some sort of recommendation for a process like that. But
Right.
I just wanted to clarify what happened with that process.
Yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Kim.
thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Kim.
Okay, we're going to turn to a discussion of the critical areas of need. And unfortunately, we don't have access to the,
No. How do I get off of this, too? No, we don't. I have it here, so I can type in as we go and read it back to you, but I can't project it up there.
okay, so we had started to talk about transportation and,
List.
I've got it. I just, sorry, Kevin, I was trying to escape from this, but. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So we had done transportation,
Mental health.
mental health, and we had started a little bit about workforce shortage.
And childcare, I have down in a minute.
And
I don't think we talked about it a lot.
I don't remember talking about childcare.
We
The
did.
only thing in the presentation written for childcare.
Yeah, because I remember only because I had an idea on that one. But-
So childcare, we have one potential solution, which is subsidized childcare for employers.
Yep.
So I guess, do we want to just kind of keep going in order, or?
Yeah, so we had done, are we, just start from the top, so are we good with transportation?
Transportation seems pretty good, yep. We've done that a couple
Mental
weeks ago.
health?
Mental health as well.
Can I add something to the mental
Yeah.
health one?
Yep.
I went to the Learn session that the Seacoast Women's Giving Circle did, which was focused on mental health and the impact on the local community. And one of the things that I was thinking about when we were thinking about like small dollars and bigger impact is the fact that they have a process in place where they give about $100,000 in grants that they would be vetting specifically around organizations addressing mental health in the community. And it might be something to consider where there would be that already set up, that there might be a recommendation around adding to that, particularly around the focus of mental health, so that there's more opportunity for the organizations that are addressing this in various capacities to be able to do more. It was a great panel that they had. They had focus on youth, they had focus on adults, and just all sorts of the challenges we've been talking about.
So add funds to,
To an already existing grant source.
okay.
Specifically focused on addressing the mental health needs in the community.
So did this just take place recently, that,
It was last week or the week before?
And was that the Seacoast Women's Giving Circle?
Seacoast Women's Giving
So I'll
Circle.
put them as a,
And is this for this next 2023, that's their initiative?
Yeah, so it's their application process. You submit in January and are notified in April or May, I think. Usually they give out about $100,000 worth based on their fundraising. They also get some support from the Foundation for Seacoast Health that also gets put into that pot of money to disseminate out.
So just curious, did they come up with some of the same issue, transportation, workforce? I mean, I can just imagine that it was pretty similar to what we're.
Well, I mean, I think the panelists were speaking, they had someone from NAMI.
NAMI.
NAMI. They had some Susan Stearns from NAMI. They had Rochelle Jones from the police department. They had Tracy Tucker, who has her own private practice working with youth. And then they had a senior in high school who's been doing support groups and different things with high school kids, specifically addressing mental health challenges. And so, I mean, there was lots of ideas and opportunities on how we could address the needs in the community and what they were seeing. And I was just thinking that since they would be vetting these, that would take the process piece out of it for the city. So it might be a nice recommendation for a chunk of the money.
I think they had Jody, too, from
They did.
Seacoast
That's
Mental
right.
Health Center. Yeah.
Yes, she was excellent.
is there a report that's available to see, like, what took place online or somewhere? Was it-
No, it was just a open-
Informal?
Yeah, it was informal in
Okay.
terms of the Seacoast Women's Giving Circle is a group of folks that fundraise and raise money in order to address a specific need in the community each year.
They have a website, though, so there might be some sort of synopsis of it.
Yeah,
or-
maybe.
Excuse me?
They have a website, the Seacoast Women's Giving Circle.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Just under agencies, I'd probably like to see a few more there.
so I was just going to say that we only have
Yeah.
Seacoast Mental Health and Seacoast Women's Giving Circle. I just added as
I-
supporting some of that, but
I think we could add NAMI, the Seacoast chapter, the YMCA,
yeah.
Greater Seacoast Community Health, Seacoast Pathways, of Granite Pathways. In full disclosure, that's a sister program of my own company, but it's a nonprofit. Connections, peer support, so peer-led mental health supports on Islington Street. And then the new Greater Portsmouth Youth Wellness Coalition.
I mean, I think this is one of the interesting ones where so many organizations are addressing the mental health needs. Like, we could list probably every organization that's.
Well, right, I had like the rec department, I had, home care, Arts and Reach, Little League, right? Because if we're thinking of getting people involved in things.
Right.
maybe that proves the point that this is, this is a huge area of need, and there's a lot of ways to kind of get at it.
Yeah.
I think we should list all of them.
Right.
Because I don't think it's everywhere. I think
Right.
it's very limited.
Excuse me, Abby, I missed what you said, what you recommended.
Oh, I was just saying, like, I was looking at some of the notes I had, and I had things like some of the different, like, comfort care, home care, arts in reach, Little League or Babe Ruth baseball, like, just ideas when you think about mental health with kids, that, you know, having those safe alternative activities.
Well, you probably should add Haven and
Yeah, so I
Chase
mean,
Home.
I think I had Haven down for, yep, I have Haven here, I have Portsmouth Adult Education, so, okay, so that's a lot, hold on.
Either, I think we need to be exhaustive or list types of agencies and not list by name.
Types is probably a good idea.
Yeah, it's like, we gotta decide.
Just to bring it back to the Portsmouth Women's Giving Circle and what they've done, I'm wondering if we can make a recommendation to the city council to do a set aside for a match. You know, if there's an organization that like them that specifically did some fundraising for mental health, they've raised $100,000 and they're going to do some grant stuff with that, right? Whether there is some additional matching money. You know, when you do fundraisers, sometimes a donor will put forward a certain amount and then it's matched by other donors. Whether that is a potential way of supporting that specific piece of it that will benefit other organizations throughout the city. Just putting that out there as an idea.
Do you mean if organization A were to do a fundraiser to raise money for this project, that the ARPA funds would match what they made on their fundraiser?
Possibly, you know, we could do a set aside for that, but it would mean that we would have to know kind of the landscape in terms of what people are raising money for and so on and so forth. And it would have to be a situation that where, in this case, it's really great because the money is targeted towards mental health. So it's an easy thing to potentially consider.
I like the fact that they are an established grant-making organization. They have a really good reputation in the community, and I would imagine have a pretty well-developed process around that. And if we're going to start to think in that vein, I wonder if we should make a recommendation that the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation is considered as a part of where money could go, so
Yes.
that takes that process piece again
Yep.
out of the hands of anyone who doesn't have the experience of how to do it or time.
The other way we could do it too is if we did make a decision we wanted, because this mental health piece is happening sooner than later, we could make a recommendation specifically to support a piece of that, but then make the recommendation that there's other venues and then list, like you're listing organizations, the type of ones, so that, again, we're not, you know, the city can decide the best mechanism if that's the process that they're going to be doing is grant making.
But Laurie, I you know, in terms of leveraging and sustainability of this over time, I love that idea of trying to bring in other organizations like the Charitable Foundation to see if they are willing to work with the city of Portsmouth on kind of expanding this over time and supporting all these different things that we ultimately, what the city council decides they're going to support.
So I was just going to put in the recommendation summary at the end, something like work with established
Grant-making.
grant-making
Yeah.
organizations.
Would you mind adding Seacoast Soul Models to the mental health list?
Lori, where do I find more information about that? I couldn't.
Who, Seacoast
You're already-
Models?
Soul, yeah, Seacoast Soul Models.
Would you say that again?
Seacoast Soul Models?
Oh, right here. Oh,
It's an
Soul meaning,
SOUL.
oh, okay. Okay, heard about it.
Carrie Penna is the executive director. They're a nonprofit. I would imagine they have a website. essentially they work with young women after school, typically. They coordinate with AIR and other organizations to support young women who otherwise might not have a space to seek support and connection with. Thank you.
I think that that's why I was thinking about, when I was at that event, thinking about that process, because there are so many smaller, like, we're never going to be able to talk and speak to all the different places that are already doing some of these things and can make big impact with small dollars. That I do like the idea of, at least for some of it, to address some of the issues we're talking about, seeing if there's a process. The challenge with this one, though, is that we'd have to make the recommendation, like a specific recommendation, when we speak to the council, because of the fact that the Women's Giving Circle would need to know if they were getting additional funds to put into that process of grant making.
Right.
But I think for maybe we can help them because of timing, but for future, we can, if we make a recommendation for some sort of a set aside for matching dollars for funds raised through private funds or through the charitable foundation and so forth, that again leverages resources that the 5 point, whatever that number is, leverages that and makes it more meaningful over a longer period of time. So,
I just had to add that I talked to Carrie last week, and she said that because they didn't have transportation, a lot of the girls who would have received services this year couldn't come. So they're serving the ones who can get a ride home, which is really sad.
are we? So we're
Still in the same place.
Mental health.
We should probably.
Yep,
Yep.
I feel like mental health is good.
Yep.
We had a lot of solutions, so work.
So as we do these, should we be deciding what,
Area,
or what kind of things have the most impact?
yeah.
So that
Right.
this can be used when people are deciding on grants to choose what's, I mean, is that
Well, I
sort of
mean,
what
there's
we're
the
doing?
impact part of it. There's those 4 questions.
Yeah.
What's the issue? What's the impact on public health? What are the solutions? And what's the fourth one?
Agencies.
Right, okay.
Agency, yeah.
Yep.
I think that's important because I'm sure we've all heard this. There are learning gaps across the whole country. They're talking about that being one of the major,
Yeah.
responses to COVID-19. It isn't just the young children, it's all across the board. Every newspaper I've read would have an article, and whether it's New York Times or Wall Street Journal, they talk about another place in the country that's going through the same thing, and it's at the top of the list of issues.
I would like to add to workforce shortage the problem. If I may, lack of landlords participating in HUD voucher programs. And
Is HUD with just one?
HUD. I think that's a good umbrella term. Lack of affordable or available child care programs, which may be tied to transportation. Lack of public/employer/provider knowledge of work income on existing state and federal benefits. I don't know if that's too wordy. Is that too much? We could keep that out. That's good. Just the
I would
HUD
throw
voucher
transportation
thing.
in there, though. with
Lack of reliable
capital.
transportation.
Yeah. That needs to be there. Yeah.
So it's interesting because you did that under workforce, but then it's all the other issues too.
Exactly.
Yep.
I had put like limited training opportunities too, just because if you have to pay, like we talked about the CDL thing, $9,000 to train even to get the job, then how do you have that? So just how are we training people for the different jobs?
and that's why I think one of the recommendations should be that the city really needs to partner with local educational organizations. I mean, the one big one that comes to mind is the community college, but I'm sure that the technical, what is it called? The CTE?
Yeah, CTE
At
programs.
Portsmouth High School should be part of that conversation because there are ways to, there are already low-cost programs, but if new ones need to be created
Yep.
to serve the current needs, then that can be done. And I know that the CTE works very closely with the community college, with Great Bay Community College. So there's a potential for partnership with the city, and so that needs to happen. I don't think that that's ever been a strong. These relationships have really been very loose. So. I think that if we're, in the case of workforce, if we're going to have an impact on addressing the needs, then there needs to be some coming together, some relationship building, some planning, and so on and so forth. That just really doesn't happen very often, and the city really kind of needs to drive that.
Another piece for that is supporting immigration, or
Yes,
people who have just immigrated.
most definitely.
I feel like we could elaborate on the impact too. Employee burnout is a huge problem in the human services, especially employee turnover, disruption of services, and then we have increased reliance on city welfare, transitional benefits. Yeah. And I know all the local nonprofits' client loads are up significantly, yet our capacity is so low because of the lack of employees. It's just a recipe for disaster.
But to add to that, Whitney, I think that we all know, those of us who work in nonprofits and run them, know that we need to find ways in which to support our staffs from a compensation perspective in better ways to make. I mean, there's an expectation that nonprofits run on a shoestring, and that's changing. But I think that needs to be considered. The city needs to understand that if it's going to retain a healthy nonprofit sector to address all these needs, all these challenges that we have going forward, that there needs to be a change in mindset about how nonprofits work. I mean, we're businesses too. We have staffs. We have to compensate them. We have burnout. We have to train and support and all those things. So there's some process of education that needs to continue to happen, and I don't know what that means in terms of making a recommendation to the city, but I think that needs to be understood as well. The nonprofits, we're doing really hard work, and the city really needs to find ways in which to support, and the state, by the way, not just the city, but the state needs to support us so that we can be around for the long term and do really good jobs. And I mentioned that, and I know some of you read the article around Crossroads House in the Portsmouth Herald, and we mentioned the fact that we have to raise 70% of our revenue from donors. That's in our minds unsustainable.
Right.
Well, could we talk about in this section, and as Will is bringing this up, could we, part of our recommendation be that the cities, there's some type of legislation like Pam had brought up about some support for nonprofits, just continuous support that is beyond this.
Yes.
Some type of legislation that we recommend, that we push for, that says that nonprofits are, that they have to be sustainable, that we have to take care of them, that they need to always be part of the financial planning. I don't know.
I mean, obviously I agree with what we're all saying about sustainability of nonprofits. I think where I'm getting caught up a little bit, though, is that what is the city's role? Like, this is the city's ARPA funds that we're making recommendations about. So what are the pieces that are educational in terms of what they need to know is the needs, and what's impacting the needs is the issues facing the nonprofits. But in terms of recommendations around specific legislative things, I'm not sure that that's something that the city would be.
No, but you raise a good point, Amber. I mean, I think that that's something that nonprofits need to come together around. And as a matter of fact, just because of that article in the Herald, Families in Transition reached out to us, and they want to get a meeting to talk specifically about that issue and how we might work together to talk to legislators about it. But more of nonprofits need to be at the table.
That'll be the next task force.
Yeah.
So have we finished mental health, or are we still in mental
We
health?
finished mental health. We're
Okay.
working on workforce shortage. We have, are there any other, we kind of had moved from the problems to the impact on public health, employee burnout and turnover, disruption of services, increased reliance on welfare. I mean, it all kind of goes together, right? Because childcare, education, transportation, extracurricular, housing, I had all that written on my notes. I don't know if you want me to add all of those things, because
Yes.
just to prove the point, it all.
It's cyclical.
All right.
Did you also put lack of funding for training? I think you mentioned that.
In the
but-
problem?
Yeah.
Lack of landlord,
Because it just
limited
costs-
training opportunities.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
What about programs or nonprofits that combine work and housing? Would that be a recommendation for workforce shortage?
It could. I mean,
Certainly important.
what we're looking at, I think, at a model that doesn't exist in the area, like a sober home that involves, workforce initiatives. That would be in my field.
There's a great one in Dover. Is it in Dover? It's in Durham. It's called Harmony Homes. And it was senior assisted living, and they couldn't get workers, so they built apartments. And then they built a housing development.
John and Maggie Randolph are amazing individuals.
Yep. So there is a model for that. I don't know if anybody's done that in Portsmouth.
No, they are the only ones doing it. They're really out-of-the-box thinkers. So,
Wasn't there something presented a couple of years ago about building workforce housing right downtown Portsmouth?
Yeah, the Ruth Griffin House exists, but it's at capacity.
Yes.
I don't know if there's any other initiatives going on, building developments.
there are a very small number of developers that are thinking about building affordable housing, and there are many challenges to it, from zoning to municipal to time and money and lawyers and so forth.
Because there's workforce housing issues just in general, and then there's supportive housing challenges for populations that need the additional support in addition to housing. And
I wonder if the property developers in the area could have some kind of tax incentive offered by the city. I mean, is that something that's possible in order to consider
There
low-income
usually is.
housing?
There usually is tax credits,
Tax
and
credits, yeah,
and there are incentives that they get through the state or through HUD. So that
But
those
non-federal, localized,
Yeah.
not a lot of red tape, just, here's your rebate.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The whole Invest New Hampshire has brought in some money for housing that way, sort of, here you go, if you're going to do it. So it has been supported in the state a little bit.
I think that the Workforce Housing Coalition should be mentioned as an organization that would be an excellent group to lead some conversations in that area.
Yeah.
Workforce Housing Coalition. Okay. We do have a whole nother slide that we had done for housing, just, which,
Our place is meeting with a developer from Connecticut in the next couple of weeks who does 40 units, 30 of which are for workforce and 10 for adults with developmental disabilities.
Nice.
So we're going to be meeting with them to find out how they do it.
Yeah.
I'll let you know.
There, just wanted to, well, it's in my mind, there are a couple things that I think are really kind of longer term and bigger issues like workforce and like housing that are going to need a lot of work over the long term. And so I hope that we don't, I'm just wondering about the recommendations that we may make to the city council on that, because I want to make sure that we are focusing on things that we can certainly, we think at least, that we can have an impact on, like mental health and like childcare and those kinds of things that I think over the next few years we will, the city working together will have an impact. I just don't know how we are going to, whatever recommendations we make to the city council on housing or workforce, I mean, I think we should, because they are obvious, but those, again, are, I just don't know how we're going to impact them over the short term.
Right.
Even if they don't respond, I think it's critical that as a group, we present that to them.
Yeah, I didn't say we didn't. We should.
Okay, and with saying that, you know, I mean, I'm thinking of half the people I've spoken with said that that's a major issue here.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all agree on
Yeah.
all the issues that we're going to present and how they overlap and the impact that they have. You know, we definitely know all of that, but I think, to your point, Will, I think what we have to do once we finish going through all of these is really look at, is there anything that is rising to the top of a true recommendation that we could make, or are we at the point where we do want to recommend that we have more time to figure some of this out, or also see the things that this group might not even be able to tackle at all because of.
Right, I mean, I like your ideas earlier, sort of not handing it off, but giving it to people who are already doing this and have systems set up and, you know, can make the decisions, and we can help them.
Which can be a bunch of different pieces.
Right.
It doesn't have, you know.
It is a bunch of different pieces.
Are there any other agencies involved for workforce shortage? I had Big Brothers Big Sisters was something we put last time, the Portsmouth High School CTE program, and the Workforce Housing Coalition.
Apprenticeship NH of Community College System. That's, Vanessa Rashid is doing really great things with creating apprenticeships.
Okay.
Probably Voc Rehab needs to be in there, especially if we're talking about supported employment and stuff. Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative is key. I would like to mention my own agency, but I don't know if that's allowed.
It is.
Job launch of Safe Harbor Recovery Center.
Do we have New Hampshire Housing on the list?
Yeah, that's
Is Rockingham Community Action on there, and Portsmouth Housing Authority?
Portsmouth Housing Authority, yeah.
I don't know if that should be under housing or workforce or both.
I feel like you can't
That's
talk
a-
about one.
That's another sticky process area, in my view. They have put forth their own request for funds of like $1.3 million to help with some projects that they have ongoing. So I just want,
See.
it's another space of overlap, and I'm supportive of what everyone's doing. I just want the pie to be shared equally as much as possible.
They
So what
requested it from this 5.4
Yeah.
million? Okay.
So what helped me was to forget all about what those requests were. Because I think what we're doing is we're coming up with our own ideas on what we see as the needs and ideas for recommendations, which could include half of the things that were put in to the various already submitted requests or application pieces. But because, again, it's a weird process of us all trying to make recommendations around the same pot of money.
I guess it's more important that the council think
Yeah.
about that at the
think-
time that they're making the decisions about where the money goes.
I think they'll be mindful, and I think that's
I'm
a
sure.
fiduciary responsibility of theirs not to duplicate efforts. But it's hard because we're talking about complex needs, which
Right.
are highly intersectional, and so we're kind of faced with either sectioning off one piece, which is kind of where we're leaning, transportation, or recommending the money go to agencies that can give out the money and make that decision, or more time. All those.
Does anyone have access to all the money that these different organizations already have?
Well, that's what the grant-making agencies would be sure of looking at, those
know, yeah.
financials and.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting for us to see that right now in terms of recommending which ones we put most of our heart and soul in. No.
I think that would be a little dangerous.
Yeah, no, that's not our job.
That's not our
It's not our job.
space.
Abby, where are we?
So
Yeah.
if we're good with workforce shortage, we still have childcare, housing, and substance misuse, as
Okay.
well as probably coming up with a plan
Yep.
for actually presenting at the meeting.
All right, so why don't we plan on the next 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes, then do a stop and then think about strategy for addressing the city council.
Okay, so if we move on, so childcare problem.
Parents can't work because their kids don't have childcare.
There's
Right.
not enough options for children that are under 6. There was already a 60% gap in the licensed childcare spots available for children under 6 prior to COVID. And that's only increased and exacerbated since COVID.
There aren't enough employees, childcare can't
Also
hire
not-
people.
Or competitive wages.
Yep.
Yes.
Or competitive,
Benefits,
yeah.
I don't know.
There's issue with training. I don't know if it's lack of training or lack of trainees. I'm not quite clear on that. There's no Head Start in Portsmouth.
That's right, they did give it a head start. Yep.
And, one area where it might not have to do anything with nonprofits would be supporting workplaces in having their own childcare. I'm not sure because if a nonprofit isn't doing it,
Right, and I mentioned
who
that
would do
last
that?
time we met,
Yeah,
because
we
it's
did.
really not that expensive, and particularly you don't need to get licensed if the staff are on site. And it's just a no-brainer, because it's a recruitment retention tool. So that's what I had under childcare.
if the city could hire someone to facilitate that within businesses, and,
So is
Even
that happening
incentivize it.
currently?
We did it just when COVID was there, so we had a learning center. So the staff could drop their kids off, we got them set on the computers and then had activities before and after school. So maybe they incentivize, maybe part of the money incentivizes employees or employers to do that.
Again, a good model to look at is Harmony Homes. They've put in their own daycare in addition to the housing for their employees
Yeah,
on site.
yeah, that would be great. That's just more expensive. The housing's really expensive.
Does Timberland still have
Yeah, they used to.
their own childcare, daycare? Just as a point of reference for,
But childcare, like many of these lower paying areas, has a really tough time attracting because people don't want to go into lower paying careers or jobs. And there's that, and then there's just not a career trajectory.
Right.
So I think that needs to be solved for not just childcare, but for a lot of our frontline workers, that they're just not getting paid a livable wage.
Right.
I mean, even at Crossroads House, where we raised our hourly wage from, I think it was 14 when I started, 13, 14 when I started, now it's $17 an hour. That is still not enough to
Right.
pay for a one-bedroom
Right,
or even a studio in the Portsmouth area, if they can find it.
right. They're getting second jobs. My staff was getting second jobs, basically.
Or if they do need childcare, they're no longer working. They're leaving the job because they'd be putting all of their money into
Right.
childcare.
Yeah.
I know that
Exactly.
the Bureau of Developmental Services is going through some changes right now, and they are recommending that the direct support providers become credentialed, and that they have steps that they can climb to
Career ladders,
improve
yeah.
their careers, and, pay minimums at each step. That hasn't happened yet, but that's what they're looking at.
Anything else for
I don't know
problem?
if you could do that with childcare workers in a city.
So are we on impact then?
So the impact on public health, I just moved parents can't work down to that one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the impact on public health is parents can't work, but also it creates so much stress,
Say mental health.
Stress.
mental health on everyone,
I
children
think the
and
kids-
parents.
Yeah, the kids aren't getting as full an experience as they could if they
Right,
have a
social
stressed out
interaction.
parent. Yeah, social interaction and all that.
Yep.
Parents can't work, stress on
And kids coming to kindergarten are probably less prepared than they used to be.
Oh, yeah.
parents.
Then that causes stress in the schools.
Although, if you're a baby boomer, none of us went to childcare.
What did you say?
Baby boomers, I didn't go to childcare. I don't.
True.
Most of us didn't.
But you also didn't sit on an iPad or an iPhone for hours.
I didn't. That is very
So-
true. That was right.
We were out. They threw us outside in the
They did.
street.
Fine,
I was
that's fine.
outside.
Come home at 9 o'clock.
Well, we had my mom had a little bell to call us in for dinner.
Childcare. Well, so that impacts obviously workforce.
Yes.
Right. Yep. Right, and some of those lower paying jobs, they can work from home and make more money, which is another, the whole telehealth is competition for frontline workers when you need people in the workplace.
Yeah, or the big box corporations.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I think if we think of childcare beyond the real younger age kids, there's the childcare before and after school issue,
Right.
for- or summertime camps and things like
Summertime is
that.
another good point, yeah.
Yeah.
And doesn't the lack of childcare put children at risk for a variety of
They're home alone.
Abuse.
Yeah.
A lot.
yeah. Neglect, yeah.
Yeah, it increases risk for unsupervised.
Then you have the transportation issue if there are after-school things.
Right. Okay. Potential solutions. There was one that we had subsidized childcare for employers, was from last time. And then I just added kind of the provide childcare at businesses. I don't know, as being an idea. I don't know how it would be funded, but.
Improve wages for childcare workers.
Yep.
But I don't know how that,
Yeah.
how,
How do you do that?
Right.
I know I had met with the director of the PEAK program, and I had asked her that question about what about doing like a sign-on bonus or whatever, and she said unfortunately that a lot of times that people take the sign-on bonuses
Right.
and then they just,
The
because the need is so great everywhere, and it's so in demand, you can stay here for 3 months and then go to another sign. So she's like, it doesn't really help that piece.
Can they pick up their sign-in bonus after 2 years of work?
I don't know if that would be the incentive. The other thing I was going to say is that, again, the CTE program at the high school, because I know they do have like an early childhood certificate that you can get through Great Bay. So just again, how do we foster that? How do we let people know more about that, I guess, that piece, for providing scholarships or other things?
I think even if we had partnerships with the high schools that they shadowed, they come to a nonprofit shadow.
I don't mean to complain, but I can't get UNH students anymore. I always used to be able to get UNH students to work, but they don't seem to need money anymore.
We
It's
got
amazing.
somebody from UNH, an intern.
You found someone? Yeah, because it's an intern, yeah.
Yeah.
I've just been trying to get people to work with people with disabilities and,
Oh,
OT department, nursing department, nobody's interested.
You
Well,
tried
the-
psychology? The
Haven't
psychology
tried
department?
psychology, yeah.
The other problem I know for us at Little Harbor, we're a partner school, there aren't people going into the teaching program. We don't have any this year, which is like really scary and sad.
It's not fun
Yeah.
anymore.
So, yeah.
This.
So we usually have student teachers who are accredited to have them, and this is the first year they don't have enough to give us, so they just stayed kind of more local, like Oyster River, Durham, and kept them at those schools. and we don't have any.
Oh, that's not good.
Not good.
Yeah, the dental
Hopefully it'll
dentist
just be a little
program at
blip.
UNE is 40% full.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if I'm thinking about childcare and from a demand perspective and a pipeline perspective, that people are not going into it because of the, certainly for not getting paid enough. And so there are a number of issues. Maybe there are not enough training programs. There are not enough workers to go around and so forth. And I'm just wondering if the model that has been in place for a long time really is, as we change as a society, whether that's the correct model that should still be in place. And again, I'm going back to the idea of more childcare in the workplace, which not everybody can do, but certain companies can do. And it would alleviate some of the strain. It would be probably better paid, better supported. Parents are on location. There are many ways in which it makes sense. And so again, it's not a solution, and it's certainly a longer-term view of it. But I just don't see how we solve the child care problem from a pipeline perspective. It's
Yeah, this is kind of workforce, but I sent you, the two of you, that article on immigrants and how their businesses are actually sort of adopting immigrants that
Yes.
come in and training them so that they have a skill. And this is,
Yes.
in Manchester, we don't have as many immigrants on this.
We have a lot in Somersworth, a lot of
We
Indonesians.
do have Indonesians, yes, because the church, yep. But
Are they actually working in the different departments?
And different companies are
Hiring them, yeah.
working with them.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just thinking maybe another potential solution too is just kind of partnering agencies we already have, so that idea between the PEAK program, the schools, and the rec department, and Seacoast Mental Health, right? Like all working together to streamline it a little bit, because right now each elementary school has their own PEAK program, and then now they're busing some kids to community campus, but is there a way to kind of, somebody to coordinate that and streamline it so that you're getting, because right now I know that Franklin didn't have enough kids for PEAK, so they sent them over to community campus, but they have like 3 kids over there. She has this empty room and nobody's there because people wanted to stay. It just got messy, and it's, is there a way to streamline it, I guess? And that's not even necessarily money, unless you're paying a person to coordinate the services, but, and then giving kids access to some of those things that already exist, like the rec department or PMAC or whatever, after school, or before school or whatever. But I don't know, just somehow taking what we already have, it just seems all like piecemeal, and coordinating it. I don't know if that's money.
Who
or just
coordinates
people.
it now? Is
Nobody.
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 Not anybody at the school, not anybody at Peak.
Nope. So if you're like a family that wants PEAK, you go to PEAK, and then each individual school has their own PEAK program. And then there's also MC3 at New Franklin, which is a great program, but then it's just another program. And so then people went to MC3 and not PEAK, and then so PEAK got left with a couple kids there at Seacoast. And now that the city owns the building over there, that's great because they have space. And so then Todd's doing rec stuff over there, which is great. But it is, again,
And Abby, what does PEAK stand for?
Oh, sorry. Portsmouth, I don't even know what it is, but it's after school, before
After
school, and
school,
after school
okay.
care. Yeah, I don't know the acronym.
But it's separate from Seacoast Mental Health Center,
Yes,
right? Because
yes.
Seacoast Mental Health Center is also located
Yep.
in all the schools.
Yes, and they send providers in, which is awesome. But again, it's like, could we do after school?
Isn't
for
Peak
some of that?
Seacoast Community School?
Yes, it is owned by, yes, it is run by
Yeah.
Seacoast Community
Okay.
School. Yes, and then Seacoast Mental Health is separate. from
Is
that,
separate, yeah. That seems like a perfect
Anyway.
place to do like a pilot,
Yeah,
to
and
see
and I
if
know
having a
Todd,
coordinator helps.
Yeah.
And that could be a
But
short-term
wouldn't the Seacoast
thing.
school be the coordinator?
Yeah.
If it's through them?
well, the PEAK program would be, but I don't know how they would do like the transportation from the school, right? Because they wouldn't pay for that. And then like community, right? Like in the rec department would run programs, but do they pay? Like I just don't know who. Again, it's who does what. But how do you coordinate that? Because that seems like an easy fix.
Is there a possible solution with having the city hire someone
Yeah.
who coordinates childcare, transportation, and
Right.
housing initiatives?
Right. I know.
I
Well,
mean, is
could that
that-
be a solution, right? Like,
Yeah,
right?
Like
because
a
it's
city to
third
school
party,
liaison,
it's,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
they would
And even
figure
if
and
it's a pilot
coordinate.
position, and if the city determines that it's a good thing to do after a year or so,
Yeah.
they can
Right.
continue.
Right. Create a
I like that
position,
idea.
That too.
Coordinate.
It's definitely needed.
Wasn't there someone who ran the PEAK and the MC3 programs for a number of years?
They're different programs.
Yeah, they're
but
different.
I
yes.
know, I participated in the after-school programs a couple of times, and they were very popular.
Yep, no, they are.
These
Yeah,
children, we
they
had
There's
definitely
never a shortage. I mean, there's just.
adults who ran different
Yeah.
aspects of it, you know? So,
And so the city of Portsmouth doesn't have a Head Start anymore.
Nope.
So
no.
do we have, do we have
Close it
anything
up.
in replacement of that?
Nope.
Or, so if a child is
Needing-
under kindergarten age,
Yep.
and they don't, and their parents don't have money to send them to a private preschool,
Well, there's public
And there-
preschool
There
in
is.
Portsmouth, isn't there?
There's the PEEP program.
but do you have to be
But it's very
accepted
limited.
into that? You have to be at a
You
certain,
have to be 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to be 3 to be in the
Okay.
PEEP program. And then there's a combination of children with disabilities and then kind of the regular ed students that go. The other problem with it, as I always found as a working parent, it's like 9 to 12, right? So
so maybe
for
we
me,
need
those
to look at
programs
that.
never worked.
Maybe we need to look at that PEEP.
Yeah,
program.
expanding PEEP.
Expanding PEEP somehow.
Peek and PEEP.
Right.
Create a position to coordinate childcare.
But where does that fall under? Like, who does
So
that
PEEP,
currently?
expanding PEEP would really be school at age 3, because there is the PEEP program, so that could be like an ESSER fund, like,
Right.
or conversation about how to expand that program.
And the school's got a lot of money.
Yeah, so that PEEP program, I would say specifically,
Right.
which is, totally agree with you, but that would be more ESSER, I think.
We can still include it as what we're seeing as
Yeah.
part of the problem
Right.
Yeah.
Or solution.
and a solution.
Yep.
But
Because it's related to city children.
Okay.
Childcare under 3, yeah.
Any other potential solutions, childcare, and then I'll do agencies. So agencies involved, again, we have the high school program for training, community colleges. or-
Mhm.
Okay. I guess maybe Seacoast Community School, right? Because they have, they're already doing it.
I'm not sure if we should mention like a child scholarship fund. There's like that benefit cliff. So those with an income under a certain limit can get a New Hampshire scholarship and go to KinderCare, let's say.
Yep.
But then you have all of those that figure it's just cheaper for me to not work.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if those are the families, those lower middle income that could really utilize 1 year of subsidized childcare.
I like that idea.
Yep, I do too.
I also think that one of the problems too is that then the women are being left out of the workforce.
Right.
More and more. And it's becoming a wider gap for them.
I mean, if we really want to talk about this issue, like, we're only picking out pieces that we might be able to solve, but the whole system is going to have to change if women are going to have an equal footing in the workforce, because it's just, that's not how our society is designed.
Right.
So certainly not something this task force is going to solve. We can be on another task force and talk about that.
We're going to have several task forces.
Solve the world one.
20-year plan.
Maybe one of these task force can be in the evening, I don't know, have snacks.
But I think it's also important to be honest about that. These are some of the things that we thought about and that we maybe agree on. I know the whole system needs to change. And that's not, I don't think there's anything wrong with presenting that to the city council. That we believe that there are many changes that need to take place for this to work out. Because there's still going to be all these people left behind.
Well, that really brings in the whole idea of how do we become more resilient
Yes.
as a community.
Yes, thank
for
you.
whatever future crisis we have, or just resilient as a community, that we continue to address these issues, because they're not going away.
I think we can try and bring our community together a little bit by having a number of public discussions or public forums on many of these issues. As a lifelong teacher, I think that works.
But
No.
I note that the immigration issue has been brought up a few times, and I think that there's an opportunity there. I don't know how many of our residents, certainly on the Seacoast, are immigrants who come here with a certain skill set and are not being, they're not integrated into our communities or into work. So that's something that certainly should get some attention, because if we're not bringing those people into the economy the way that they should be brought into the economy, then it's a missed opportunity.
I mean, some of them come in as doctors and they're not credentialed here, and so they can't.
They don't get a visa.
Can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Some of them come in as doctors and aren't credentialed here, and so they can't work as doctors.
So one of the things I was just thinking about it when you were talking, Will, about recommendations is that knowing that some of these issues are so lofty and way bigger, and we're listing all of these organizations that address different areas, maybe a recommendation could be to have the city continue to have a couple of ad hoc committees that really dive deep into these topic areas before spending the money.
Yeah,
You know,
I
so
like
that you get the folks to really look at how can we fix transportation to all of these
Right.
things, or how can we do that, and not ongoing, just like a quick couple of meeting ad hoc things.
Well, and that gives Kim a chance.
Not ongoing.
Not ongoing.
No, but that gives Kim a chance to get her needs assessment done, too.
Right, and then you have data to go with it.
Yeah. That would be a good
So
solution.
continue the conversations about the areas of need.
Right, and maybe they're split up, though, so one group dives into transportation task force or whatever.
Public.
Because these are huge, although they all interact with each other.
Right.
But I'm just thinking process-wise, if there was a way for, because I'm still getting caught up in the very small amount of money that is available for all these things. To me, you would still have to have some sort of understanding of what is there a little pot of money for each of these topic areas in terms of what people are coming up with for solutions? Because those would really be the solution-based folks saying, we think this one thing at this level or these couple of things could come in, but you kind of have to have costs associated with that. But I might be getting too process focused.
Where you were in the beginning of what you were saying, though, I think is something worth thinking further about, is perhaps it's part of our recommendation that the small amount of money that has been designated for this group to help inform the council with, that there's a percentage placed for this topic-focused area, this topic-focused area, so on and so forth, and then it's left to some sort of grant-making organization, some organization that already has the operation in place to be able to get the funds to the organizations that can provide the direct service.
Yeah, but I think the other piece I was trying to get at is there an opportunity to get creative with the folks that, rather than all these siloed groups applying for good projects that they're doing and things that are having an impact, but getting the folks together that can really think outside the box to
Maybe it's
say,
phase two. Maybe that's a phase two.
maybe.
I love that idea, Kathy, only because I think that we all are, at least I am, struggling with, having to come up with some recommendations for the city council to consider with this short amount of money over a short period of time, when we know that we are talking about some very big, significant challenges that we have as a community and as a society. And as already been said, we kind of have to think out of the box and start to think about how do we transform how we think about some of these things or how we do them. And I think that's where the real value and work can be done, is in carrying on beyond this body and coming together as a community and figuring some of this stuff out for the long term, for resiliency. Because I think you're heading in the right direction.
This seems like a long-term
This is-
process. Like, we ought to be, whatever this committee is, ought to be researching success stories around
Right.
the country. Why reinvent the wheel?
Right, and we're all nonprofits.
Or how about other
We need
countries?
Yeah, other
We need
countries.
some
Take Denmark,
for-profit partnerships here. I mean, we're all poor.
Yeah.
I
But,
think we need
if
to
you
get
have the-
those
Sorry.
industries involved,
Yes.
I just,
Yes.
But still, it's like if we have the 5.4 million, 3 million goes to the health department, that leaves us with 2.5 million. 1 million can go towards providing nonprofits with grants that if they're aligned with what we've picked out, and then another million can go to support Peak and Peer.
Yeah.
And we're
I don't
looking,
know.
and we're looking for profit partners to.
And there's all the other groups that are going to do the exact same thing that we
right,
Exactly.
but I
Don't forget that.
like
Like
the
water, sewer,
long-term
and-
look.
yeah,
I mean,
sidewalks.
I think that's important to look at it from a long-term perspective, because we're going to be in this situation again, and if we don't work together, we're going to have the same issues.
I added
Well, and
that
I
to
think
the
it's
recommendations.
it's at least important for us to speak to the fact that we recognize that there's not quick fixes for
Right,
all of these
right.
things, and that there is going to require additional.
Right, I always like to give the example up in Laconia, he doesn't work there anymore, but at the health center up there, they actually did a 401, they actually formed a nonprofit and 501c3, and they all came together, companies and nonprofits, and they built a sidewalk so the kids could walk to school. And so you saw, they actually did this together as a group and wrote grants and got donations, and because that was going to reduce their obesity rate. So, it's, looking at from the long-term perspective, but getting other people involved, not just us, not just nonprofits.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we have housing and substance misuse.
We're almost there, we're almost there.
We can do this.
We've got 15 minutes.
Okay, okay.
Do housing.
I
Well,
can,
housing, we talked a lot because we were doing workforce shortage, which they're like hand in hand. So if you want to repeat, just tell me and I'll
Housing.
stick it in.
I'll just say about housing that we need to figure out a way as a community to support, one, to identify and to support developers that are very interested in developing affordable housing or housing to house vulnerable populations. And they're there, but it's such a constrained and convoluted process that people get discouraged and they walk away, and then they build market rate housing, so we need to figure out a way as a city in which to identify, bring those people forward and nurture them and so forth.
Okay.
And also accept those cards. What are the
vouchers?
Section 8.
vouchers? Yeah.
yeah,
Section 8 vouchers.
Section 8, yes.
They're cool.
Incentivize the landlords to accept them.
absolutely.
I think a part of that is really education to landlords
Yes.
and the community to better understand what that means. There's so much misunderstanding. And if there are a handful of developers that are interested in participating in that kind of project, it seems as though the project gets to a certain point and then people that live in that area
Right.
fight about it
Yeah.
and complain about it and say they basically not in my backyard, they're NIMBYs.
Yep, yep.
And so I think the more opportunity that there is to provide education, so that would be like the Seacoast Workforce Housing Coalition. They do a really great job at myth busting. I think that has to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other piece too, though, is the just rental assistance in general, whether or not you qualify for a voucher. It's still an ongoing challenge for folks that will eventually get to the point of being able to sustain their own housing, but getting to that point, I know a lot of the folks that we work with are initially homeless, even though they may have good jobs because they're fleeing leaving an abusive relationship, but at the same time, they need that time where their rent is being subsidized while they get back on their feet to that sustainability. And the rents, it's, you know, if you don't have that assistance.
If you don't have it, you can't make it.
It's impossible.
Yeah, I could go on and on.
So provide rental assistance.
Temporary.
Yeah, well, because we heard from Ellen when she was talking about the challenges for the welfare department now that that program was ending for the rental assistance. And
Yep. And then I wrote educate landlords and developers to accept Section 8 vouchers, or about Section 8 vouchers.
Do we have a new name for them yet? Is it not Section 8
Yeah, it's
voucher?
called housing choice vouchers.
Thank you.
Housing choice, yes.
About housing choice
Housing
vouchers.
choice
Yeah,
voucher.
Section
I
8
really
is
want to
old
get rid of that.
Yep.
It's got a
Promotes
stigma.
NIMBY.
Housing choice vouchers. Okay.
So Abby, are you going to forward this to us?
I shared it with all of you a while ago, so it's a document that you all have, but I can reshare it. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the same
thank you.
document, I'm just updating it.
The-
I'll edit it and stuff.
The other
but-
thing is, and I don't know how we do this, but I know the Portsmouth Housing Authority has been doing a good job at trying to build additional housing for vulnerable populations. So they need to be supported however that happens. So.
Yeah, I've seen, you know, that they offer, I'm not sure, maybe Dover Housing is offering workshops for renters on how to be a good tenant.
Yes,
Oh, that's
Because people are missing some basic skills.
we do that.
And
Yeah,
so-
we do that, but we also want to talk about landlords and identifying landlords because they are out there. The problem is that they are very nervous about bringing people. They have the wrong idea in their head about who they're renting to a lot of times, but we assign case managers to all of our residents when they're going to housing. They help with the education piece, getting them prepared for housing, and even post being placed in housing to stay in that relationship in case there are issues that come up. So that really helps to build that relationship between the tenant and the landlord, and to mitigate any challenges or issues that come up. And that's just something that I think has been really helpful to our residents as they get placed in permanent housing. So that's
So support programs. That
Yeah, some more of the supportive housing.
support programs.
Back on mental health, housing first initiatives need to be promoted. That would be a mental health thing.
And substance related.
Yeah.
If I just go back to housing, because we jumped, of course, to solutions, because we keep talking about the problem, but what, for problem and impact on health, what would the statements be that you want
Not
there?
enough.
So problem, lack of
Lack of.
affordable housing?
Affordable.
yeah. And what does
Which
affordability?
impacts
What does
workforce.
affordability mean?
I know, right?
Yeah.
We're building housing even on the affordable side for people who are making $48,000 plus across the state. We're not building housing for people who are making barely $30,000 a year. So those frontline workers who are making $15 an hour, they can't. So this would mean that we would have to build housing at $600, $700, $800, and that nothing like that exists.
Right. So lack of affordable housing for individuals, should I put a threshold who are making less than blank? Like $30,000 or something like that?
Yeah.
Just to kind of hit home the idea that we're not
Making
talking
less than
about.
48,000.
48,000. Okay.
I think we need income tax.
Whoa, don't get crazy.
No.
This is New Hampshire.
So another one would be, obviously, because we just wrote it as a solution, landlord, or I don't know if we say landlords not accepting the housing vouchers or something like that.
Well, they're choosing not to
Or,
participate.
I think stigma is an issue.
Landlords, yeah.
And I think Home for All is one of the agencies you guys work for that basically matches does that education of landlords about voucher benefits and then matches case management services with those units that they set aside.
And what was that called?
Home for All.
Home for All.
And also, people landlords need to be educated about supportive housing, because if you have people caring for the people in the house, you tend to have really good, hygiene and rule following and things like that, because they have supervision.
Impact on public health.
Does anyone know how much it
Risk of
costs to
homelessness?
rent?
Hold on one
I know
second.
2 older women. Oh, I'm sorry.
Abby asked a question.
Homelessness.
Risk for homelessness.
Impact on the workforce because
Yeah.
people are leaving. And
They're all going to live in Farmington.
We need to move on to the last topic, which was
Substance misuse.
substance misuse.
Okay. Individuals are dying of drug-related causes. It's the problem.
Hang on, she's still on
Hold
housing.
on.
Sorry. Ready to get her done.
Housing. Okay, problem?
Individuals dying of drug-related causes. I don't know how we want to put this, but it's a family issue. So if an individual is struggling, the whole family is struggling, and often silently suffering, because it's so, the stigma is so prevalent still.
Increase in family stress and
Yeah.
dysfunction.
Yeah,
Maybe.
entire family system is affected.
What we see at Chase Home is kids who are orphaned.
Yeah.
Because their parents have died from ODs. And that's still happening.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it definitely affects the family system for sure. Because then you have the other systems in the family that need to take care of these kids.
Or
Or
the
can't.
or the
Right.
child itself becomes, has at
Very at risk.
Yeah.
has drugs in their system when they're born, that type of
Oh,
thing.
yeah, we see that quite a bit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's infant mental health initiatives, yeah. And then, let's see. And then, yeah, like, I'm sorry, what is her name? Mimi was saying, parental caregiver misuse, the effect on children, such as neglect or chronic neglect. And then that stresses the DCYF, and it's pretty bad right now.
Increases stresses on the support system.
State systems, yeah.
Okay.
And we're seeing a lot of like recidivism. So people are returning to these systems involved families, because there's so much active or return to use due to COVID. And it appears, according to the, latest statistics, that we're on track with the same amount of overdose deaths in New Hampshire related to drugs. But I don't think that captures the full extent of current use and rates of recurrence, return to use. I think people are in active full swing, and it's silent. And it's not getting better. Let me put it that way. It's not.
Right.
I would also point out the connection to adverse childhood experiences and trauma, childhood trauma, leading to substance misuse and abuse.
Yeah.
And the option for treatment obviously is
Yes.
pretty low and scarce in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Particularly
There's a
for
lack of
adolescents.
available treatment beds.
And expensive, right?
Oh, yeah, and then there's that, lack of detox options.
One of the things that we see is adults who come with all this trauma from childhood. So that's, those
Yeah.
early experiences
And
with
providers.
parents that are addicted and they're being neglected. I mean, that carries on for life.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is this an appropriate time to bring up this other Pine Tree?
Pine Tree Institute?
Yeah, and they're requesting funding from the city as well, and it was asked if we want to include this organization in our recommendations, or I'm not exactly sure
I listened to the city council meeting and I read through this.
I know they do a lot of stuff with the ACE scores, because I've done a lot of that, but maybe it's just somewhere that we include in with our agencies, is Pine Tree, as another
Yeah.
agency that's working towards this.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how we would include it. I mean, other than to speak to our recognizing that we do need to bring groups together of folks to address, figure out ways to address this. But the funding piece, I'm not quite sure what we do with any. I don't think we do anything with that.
Right, I agree.
I don't know.
It just becomes a part of the list of organizations.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if they were requesting specific ARPA funds or if they were just requesting. I think I asked that in the last meeting. I'm not remembering what Karen said. I thought she said it was general city.
I think they just came to the city, and then I think Andrew was at the meeting and said, oh, we're doing a lot of public health, send it to this committee kind of thing to see what they think.
Well, and I know that the Pine Tree Institute is working with the city. I mean, they have their consultants, or they're doing some projects with the city around mental health.
Well, there's this Portsmouth Recovery Ready Community Coalition, which is a group of folks. It's not just Pine Tree.
Right.
Right, and then there's the Seacoast, does it list the Seacoast Coordinated Response Committee? Yeah, so
Well, it
they,
lists coalition members.
but I think we should just list it, right? With
Yeah.
Pine Tree, and then,
So if we go into agencies involved, put it there.
yeah. Seacoast Mental Health,
So is this
Safe
coalition
Harbor
already
Recovery
existing?
Center.
Yes. Does exist.
Oh, July 20, convened in July 2022. This is the coalition.
It does feel like a funny process, though, because
The whole thing is weird.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, we're listening.
I'm like, please list Safe Harbor Recovery Center.
Haven, because we're doing.
Yeah, but you should, in Haven, yes.
Doing the work already. Like
True.
I think that's the outcome, right? Like, why reinvent the wheel? We have all these ideas. We have organizations working on it, and now we just support them. But how does it go about?
Yeah, I just think in the presentation,
I know.
it's important to say that this is not exhaustive because
Right.
right.
we weren't necessarily brainstorming.
And maybe it's just types, like we said,
Yes.
like,
Yeah,
not just
it might be
names.
better
I
to
think
do
it's
that.
definitely better as categories,
Yeah.
homeless, healthcare, substance misuse.
Yeah.
Well, the what is it called that I found? We have our guidance department uses the list that has like all of the nonprofits, the Community Resource Network.
Oh, yeah.
It has like pages and pages. I mean, one of my ideas was like, could we fund it to make it user friendly? Because
Yeah,
there's
I
a
brought it,
million,
actually.
right? The 97 pages.
Yes.
But what if you could go onto their
my
support them,
gosh.
and you could go onto their website and you could put in a search bar,
Yes,
Right.
yes, I
homeless
like
support,
that.
drug recovery,
Oh
and then
my
the agencies would
gosh.
come up. Like I was like, could we put? I don't know where you
That
put
seems
that.
like a easy.
That's a good
Because
idea.
I did the same thing in my guidance department. I printed the whole thing, and that's what I used to look up a lot of the
Yeah.
agencies. And I was like, wow, we have so
Right.
many great agencies, but I didn't know that until I went through the index. But what if it was a Google like search website? You
Right,
could
that
type
would
it
be
in.
Yeah,
great.
a city
Could we
tool.
fund that?
96 pages?
This is Susan Turner's
Right,
Community
Community
Resource Network.
Yeah, she's yours.
But it's great, but then you have to print it out like every year because they update it, which is cool. But what if you
It's
could
not
actually
searchable,
type it
yeah.
in?
think
And
that's
just
a
like
great
go to their
idea.
website, and you're like, I am an
Yes.
individual, or I am a whatever that needs
Yes.
blank.
411 not have that?
And didn't the state do something like
That's a
that
good
for
question.
SUD resources or something?
This is systems.
That's a good point, though, that Granite United Way might be already doing
No.
this with 211.
They don't.
They don't?
I talked to Lauren Wool about this process because I was going to have her invite her to present or share, and then we were so far in the process, I thought it's just not worth it. But actually, Granite United Way should be on the list for so many of these things.
Home for All is part of Granite United Way.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, we
Yeah.
have just a little bit over 10 minutes.
Potential solutions for substance misuse. Potential solutions for substance misuse. What are the
Fund existing agencies. It's so shameless, I can't.
Well, I mean, it all goes like if you could provide housing,
Housing.
and you could provide transportation. and-
Yeah.
But
Is there any solution to the lack of providers for treatment?
Well, and again, I
I mean, that is so
I look at
complicated.
solutions in terms of going back and looking at prevention, education, and
Yeah.
addressing childhood trauma and
Yeah.
all the pieces that lead to it.
After-school programs.
As well as the supportive services that are needed for the imminent, current, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
It's a wraparound.
very comprehensive. It's almost like this cuts across all
Exactly.
That's
categories.
workforce.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we need those people to be working.
Yes, especially, yeah, but they need supported
Right.
employment too, because it falls under disability. So,
Right.
those in recovery have unique needs and
It falls under
Book rehab,
housing because of the
does book
supportive
rehab
housing.
under housing, yeah.
Yep.
Book rehab.
Folk rehab
Right,
is
and
involved.
The recovery-friendly work, I learned a lot from, because that's what we do
Yes.
now. It's
Really good.
I learned so much.
They're great. They're
Yeah.
a huge partner of ours. And they designate places. And then we work
say,
with
educate
the clients
caregivers
themselves to develop that plan and then offer recovery support. But you guys do the recovery support too, once they're placed,
Right.
continuing that support.
Yeah.
So are we, I know we're talking about the presentation, but is part of that, are we going to be looking at extending this group's time, or is?
Well, that's
probably take
that's
some
one
from the other
question.
slide.
Do we feel that we need more time? We certainly will probably say that the health department is doing their study, and that, they've requested that some of these funds, or the funds don't get expended until that study comes out to at least confirm what we all think is happening.
And are we looking at presenting, I know Karen mentioned the 5th, right?
Fifth.
Yeah.
And that's the one we want to, because she said that there was,
Yeah.
but that we would need to get stuff, if we're
Right, like
presenting
I
on
would
the
need to
5th.
clean this up and give it to her,
today.
like, yeah. I do wonder about, though, just like to get like a pulse on it, like if it's worth just going, sending the city council this ahead of time and then presenting just kind of an overview, this is what we're doing, and have them say like, if we want to keep going, sounds great, or if they steer us in a direction, I don't know. Because we're doing what we think they want, but I don't know.
I almost feel like we need more time.
I do too, just to come up with.
Yeah, because, I mean, we're having all these wonderful conversations, but
Right.
it needs to continue to be filtered, I think. And we're not there. I mean, we've got 10 minutes to end this meeting, and we just haven't filtered it enough. I mean, we've got some good stuff. We've gone through the process, but we need a couple more meetings, I think, certainly before I feel comfortable saying,
Do you think it would be worth having Andrew come back to a meeting then or something?
Yeah.
I just worry that we're
Yeah.
like going and I don't know.
Well, I think we had an opportunity to present at either the meeting on the 5th or on,
It was
Wasn't
like
there
a
one right after it
Wednesday.
or something?
It was like a Wednesday or
The
something.
13th, the something.
12th.
the 12th.
Marked already.
Oh, that's a Monday.
The December 13th, right? Nope, that's when we were going to meet. I don't know what the other one was.
I can look it up on the city website. So I just am looking for clarification. Are we thinking that we don't want to present anything in December? Or that we present sort of like an update? And
think we
ask for
should.
more
Yeah,
time?
I think we have to present.
Yeah.
I think we should
December.
do something.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do the later date.
Is there a later date?
Your
Yes.
update could be the top issues, the main three things, that if we're talking about, mental health issues and childcare and transportation.
Workforce.
And workforce, yeah.
well, the way I would approach it is whoever, we need to identify one or two people on the committee that are willing to present and just give an overview of the work that we've been doing and where we're at. If we're going to ask for, some more time, and just have a bit of a conversation about what we've been talking about, and from a kind of a 30,000-foot level in terms of, this is not an easy process. I mean, given where we are as a community, meaning New Hampshire, the city, the seacoast, that we want to make sure that whatever recommendations we make are both thought about in the short term, if we can make some short-term recommendations, but also taking us down the path of thinking about how do we evolve as a community longer term, and how do we thinking about resiliency. If another crisis hits us, how do we address that? Because the 5.5 million or whatever that number is only going to get us so far.
So it looks like the 14th is the city council meeting, and another one. There's one on the 5th and one on the 14th.
Right.
Right, I think our challenge, though, is that we still would need to get them everything before we're only scheduled to meet again on the 13th. So
Right, I think we
that-
need to meet sooner.
Yeah.
Right, but I don't know, I mean, I like the idea of us going and presenting kind of this whole process and going through all the stuff that's on the slides that you put together, and then making the recommendation of this task force continuing to meet for, and then to come back at a certain, like, that we come back, put a timeline on that.
We can go and say, we're not ready to make
Right.
any recommendations.
But here's our brainstorm, here's
So
what
here's
we've
our
been working
brainstorm.
on.
But we think we can.
Here are
I
all
think
of our
we need to
ideas.
say that,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what
Right, we
has
just
been.
need to streamline it a little.
Yeah, what's come to light is this is a highly
Right.
complex issue, and what COVID did was expose all these vulnerabilities,
Yes.
but we have an opportunity to really make positive, sustained
Yep.
impact.
You
We
just
don't
did that
want to miss
really
it.
well. I think you should.
It's gone.
Yeah, I think let's go.
Well, and I think part of that presentation could be, and again, it doesn't have to be our recommendation, but recognizing that there are groups like the Seacoast Women's Giving Circle, so that can still be put out there to the city as something that's happening, addressing one of these issues, and they could decide if they wanted to put
Right.
anything towards that or not.
All right, so
But it doesn't have to
question
be
one,
this group.
are we ready, are we saying we want to go to the December 5th meeting and say
This is where we are.
that
Okay.
this is where we are? We need more time.
I think we have some level of presentation we can do with some definitives, right?
Yeah.
I think we
I
can,
think so.
boom.
All right, so we're good on December 5th?
Yes.
Do we have to provide written material to them before that?
Yes.
And
So I don't-
how's that going to happen?
Well, we can provide this. I mean, I think
Right.
this is all we need to provide as your framework, and you're just going up and going through, and this is our brainstorm, this is our work. I
Okay.
mean, I just don't know, Karen's away, but if Jessica gets a
think-
tour,
I
maybe,
think
so
you
I could
could
just email
send it to
Jessica and say
Jessica.
it's all set,
Yep.
send it to them.
Yes.
Yes. Question 2, who wants to present? Anybody feeling the Whitney?
Will,
Lori?
I'm having surgery that day.
Abby?
I'll co-present with you.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Yes,
There
I
you
will-
go.
I will do it.
Beautiful.
Whitney.
So Lori and Whitney.
Lori and Whitney.
Yeah, and I think it's just an overview. I
Right.
don't think we
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
deep. I think this is what we've been working on, and we need more time. So I will get this
Next Monday.
typos edited out and to Jessica to send to the city council.
And you'll send it to.
And I'll send it to all of you,
Send it to
all in the
us. Oh,
same
thank you.
email.
Yeah.
I know the meeting is not adjourned, but I need to.
I'm going to add, I think I'll pull more.
Thank you.
I'll text you
I mean, I think we
tomorrow
have it in
when you have
the
your phone
other
again.
one, because we started going on and on about all that.
So-
We just reorganized.
And we're not meeting again between now and the
You're
5th.
going to present an overview.
Right.
Right.
So how are we deciding?
Know that.
We'll decide how much of the presentation we're reading, basically, and key
Maybe
talking
we can
points.
have a cup of coffee or something between now
Yeah,
and then.
we're allowed to do that.
Just two of us, it's okay.
Subcommittee?
I don't know in
Is that
terms
a
of process.
subcommittee?
Should we adjourn the meeting and then?
Yeah, let's do that.
I move we adjourn the meeting.
I second it.
Okay, wait a minute. Any public comment?
Nope.
No public comment.
Nobody is
Okay.
on our-
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
We did.
Who's
I
ma-
move we adjourn.
Lori's moved. Who's seconded?
I seconded it. Oh. I haven't meant.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.